So I will talk about how to chase bugs in embedded system and circuits. And chasing bugs is for me one of the most important things in computer science. You will be, and computer industry, you will see that. Everybody is talking about the Internet of Things. And so the Internet of Things, I like this picture, which is quite old now for me, because it's the Internet of old things. It's not the Internet of smartphones and so on. I'm not too much interested in that. It's the Internet of musical instruments, of cars, of cameras, of tooling, of teletravail, how do you say that? Homework here in Igloo, and housing, and ships, and fireworks, and so on. So the informatics of old objects, not only new objects. So maybe you don't know these figures, but the number of electronic components built per year is 1,000 billion. The number of microprocessors built in a year is about 80 billion. The number of telephones built in a year is 1 billion. And computers in almost nothing, a few million, a few hundred million maybe. But that means that the computers and even telephones account for a very tiny fraction of the microprocessor built. The rest is in objects. And there will be soon far many objects on the Internet than human beings. So that's nice, but is it useful? Yes, if you do it right. Is it safe? We talk about that. Is it secure? That will be the main problem. That is, Internet of Things will be relatively slow for two reasons. One is bugs, and the other one is security problems. And these two are related. So we discussed that. So essentially, we have a massive infestation by pucerons, as we said in France, small chips. And there is lots of promises. Everybody talks positively about that, but there is a lot of wishful thinking. Many of the things that people say won't work simply because they neglect the main problem. And the main problem, I will show them. So this is the car I bought when I got out of school. So you see a typical car of the 20th century. And it's very characteristic. It has 4 wheels, 2 beams, 1 steering wheel, 4 seats. And if you buy a car exactly now, you get exactly the same thing, same number of seats, of wheels, and it didn't change. Nothing is changed, maybe the shape a little bit. But the inside has changed very strongly. And the selling point for car manufacturers now is informatics. They don't call it informatics, and that's typical. They call it electronics. They never understood that that's not the right name, although it's of course electronics as well. So you get everything, and that's a useful engine control has been there for long. And stop and go is more recent, but is very useful in towns. Direction and suspension, braking. No human being can brake on cars. Okay, let's continue. Radar, airbags, and so on. So there is a lot of hardware and software in a car, and since all cars work mechanically well now, when I was a kid, you had the choice between having a good suspension or beams. You never had you have to choose. I mean, now you have everything in every car. But the software can be a problem. And it will change a lot also because cars will talk to each other. That's what people plan, talk to the road. It's stupid to lose a driver's license point because you didn't see a sign. I mean, the car should be able to see sign without you. And of course, there will be autonomous cars in the US. It's not yet done because legal problems are not trivial. And in Europe, I think legal problems cannot be solved easily. It's different because in the US, people think that driving a car is the less interesting thing you can do in your life, while in Italy, it's exactly the converse. So that will be different. So that's fine. But now there is this big problem, which is to me the center of the discussion, is that up to the 20th century, the industry and science were about 3 things: matter, energy, and waves. So it all started with matter and energy in the 70th and 18th century. engines and so on. It's about matter and energy. Waves came in at the end of the middle of the 19th century, first with the telegraph, then with the telephone, radio, whatever. So this is waves and telecom. So this triangle has shaped the mind of people. And all French people are tuned to speaking of matter, energy, and waves. And exactly 0% of an age going to baccalaureate has seen more than 10 seconds of informatics in his life. So that's a big problem. And now in the 21st century, the end of the 20s, comes a new guy called information. So it's really a tetrahedron, but information tends to be much more important than the rest. It's very typical that, why? Because information is much easier to deal with. You know, information has no weight, has no smell, doesn't burn, doesn't rot, and so on. So it's very different. But the problem here is many actors are not used to think about information, and they think of information in the same terms as they think of matter and energy. And this doesn't work at all, at all. And for example, in automotive, people speak of electronics because this is still matters and waves, and they reason as if the thing was electronics while it is software. So most people have decided that software is easy. That's their problem. Huh? And that's very dangerous to think of that. So information is very important compared, for example, if you look at the major companies in the world now, the biggest transportation company is called Uber. It has no cars. It has the information. The biggest renting housing company is Airbnb. It has no flats. It just has the information. And so on. You can find lots of examples where information drives the world much more than matter. And in fact, many people have become subcontractors of people who only deal with information. And one of the fears of the European, in particular, car manufacturer is to be subcontractors of Apple and Google. And I don't invent that, they told me. So that's serious. And we'll see that this gives many, many problems and many difficulties for the future. Here are the underestimated aspects, the nuisance of bad design. And bad design in software is very different from bad design in objects, because bad design in objects, you see it. In software, you see nothing. It's invisible. Software is fundamentally invisible to human beings. Even to train human beings is difficult. But to untrain human beings, I mean, if you look at a piece, 20 million lines of code that do the right thing and 20 million lines of code that don't do the right thing, anyway, you cannot read them in your entire life, so it's not visible. The difficulty of building models, we know how to build models of mechanical parts. We absolutely don't know how to build models of software. It's an open question here, as well as this. The dangerous consequences of functional bugs, I will show you many. The huge security problem due to bad design, and security is a very serious thing which is underestimated by huge factors. And the huge importance of non-functional bugs. And that's a big change in industry, because industry is somehow trained to look for functional testing and functional bugs. But the problem is that security is all about non-functional bugs. And how do you test non-functional things? Interesting open problem. Good. So many people still think that software is the easy part of the problem. And I made, for example, here in Toulouse, long ago, a report on a space software, where it was exactly like that, and with 20 people, including Paul Caspi, the author of Lustre, and so on. And we say the way you do things in the space for software, it will just never work. So we are fired, and that was just before the explosion of Ariane 501, which we talk about later. So it's still true. It's still true, for example, in automotive. I know that from a high director of automotives, and that's it. That's very, very problematic. Okay, so this is what we may get to. That is a very nice system that look very nice, but are riddled with bugs. and that don't quite work. So I have a potentially infinite list of bugs in automotive. People don't make much advertisement on that, but we shall see some of them. Example, I have a Berlingo. You know what is a Berlingo? I thought I had a 4L, but the 4L was really without electronics, and the Berlingo has not much, but enough. Enough, for example, it has the engine control, and I came back home and I had the key in my hand and the engine was running. I said, oh, that must be software. It's impossible to do that with hardware. And of course, I came and I did that 30 times and then it works. And when coming back home, it was actually not software, it was worse, it was architecture. Then I went to the garage and the garagist said that we found the bug. It was due to the stoplight controller on the brake pedal. So you see the very good system design when you can stop your engine from stopping because of a problem in the brake pedal. So that shows you that you absolutely master architecture and security architecture. And I can give you lots of examples like that. A friend of mine at SRL Technology, she was verifying the SRL compiler, and her uncle had bought a new Espace. He was very proud of his new car with a credit card instead of a key and so on. And it had a problem that there was a multiplexing problem. That is, they put buses instead of wires. And the problem is that he had problems that when he wanted to have the beams, he got the wipers inside, but not always, and so on. So he went to the garage, said, what this bullshit? And the garage said, no problem. Open the hood, and under the hood, you have one plug for oil, one pipe for oil, one for water, one for wiper cleaner, and one for software. So he got the software entirely downloaded, but he made a very bad mistake. He stayed in the car, and then the garagist says, yes, you can go. And he took his credit card, put it on the contact, her shrunk, and they had to break the door to get him out. So this happened, by the way, for the Prime Minister of Thailand visiting Angela Merkel. They did the same on the armored car of Angela Merkel with her son. BMW was caught several times already by telephone apps that would open all the high-end BMW cars, so this is well documented on the web. A poor woman killed four kids at a bus stop, and she said, I pressed the pedal, but nothing happened. And of course, Volvo, that was the Volvo, said, no, that's bullshit, she pressed the accelerator. And then there was a thorough analysis, and it was found that it was a bug in the brakes. And she indeed pressed the brakes, and nothing happened. And that was a bug which was on all the cars. And so that's not very nice for her nor for the cars. Last year, a guy died in a Mercedes because of a very good design that makes it impossible to open the car, even if you are inside, if you don't have the key. Died in the sun. Can't understand that. And so on. But this one is the worst. Toyota had a very big problem in 2014, which is not very, it's totally public, but nobody knows it. So they killed a fair number of people by the car going full speed, oof, and no way to stop it and so on. And so a judge, this is America, a judge said, we want to see the code of the engine control. So Toyota said no. And the judge said, okay, no more Toyota in the US. So Toyota said yes. So the code was expertized by Michael Barr. So this is a report you can find on the web, 800 pages. Here is the first page. There are a large number of functions that are overly complex. Some of them are untestable. There is no way to develop a reliable test suite or test methodology to test all the possible things that can happen. Functions are unmaintainable. You should not try to maintain them, otherwise you will get new bugs in the process. The fail-safe are inadequate. The safety architecture is a house of cards. And Toyota is the #1 company in the world in automotive. So everybody was quite surprised. I don't think it has been fixed, because the report says you cannot fix that. It's just, it has hundreds of threads with thousands of shared variables, no protection whatsoever for any variable. Okay, so this is the reality. Huh? It's not a fake, it's not an invention. And so that's a big problem. So for security, this one is interesting too. So it's 2015. Some researchers have shown that you can take full control of the Jeep Cherokee, this thing which is quite popular in the US. You can take full control of any Jeep Cherokee from any internet terminal, from any browser. Entering by the autoradio, and the security is just absent. And so you can put the engine full speed, pull the brakes, remove the brakes. The only thing they could not do is to turn the steering wheel while the one going forward. Backwards they could, but not forward. And so they did that to one of their friends, taking full control, and that was interesting. First they put the radio full speed. So the guy, well, you see an American radio full speed, that means something. And then put the wipers and sending water all over the place. And then going full speed and then braking in the middle of the highway and then finally getting out of the road. So this is what they say. Their code is an automated, this is what is said about their hack. Software that lets hackers send commands through the Jeep entertainment system to its dashboard functions, steering, brakes, and transmission, all from a laptop that may be across the country. So this is the reality in 2014, and I don't think people really care about that still. So that's a very big problem. Samsung is developing a nice, I have personally a digital house because I have all the switches, the light switches, because I have a stone house. I didn't want to put electricity in there, so it's all Zigbee. It's a French company called Theod. But Samsung did, but I'm living in the middle of nowhere, which helps. Samsung did a thing called SmartThings. Did a way to turn your home into your smart home. So a security researcher looked at that, not very long. It's very nicely done, a priori. It's connected through a local box and a cloud secure server in Japan somewhere, or in Korea. And the installation and modification of the system cannot be done in a secure way through HTTPS connection to the server and so on. However, they close the code, so the code is not public, but they make it open for app developers. Because the code is secure, they say app developers can do what they want and build new applications. So this is very nice. This is internet-like. But the design is on capability-based security logics that you can ask in the network, you can do a discovery, which devices are allowed to record temperature, for example, and then you hear the name of all the devices. But then the capability system is not well designed, and also the event messaging system is not well designed. It's trivial to see that you can get more capabilities than what you request, and you can use them, and it was not very difficult for them to do very interesting things like turning the oven on, which is quite dangerous if you leave it on for long, raising false alarms, and illegal door opening, which is not very nice, or worse, injecting fake PIN codes in the door locks. And this is not particularly difficult to do. And it's very hard to fix, because if you do that, many of the existing, if you make the fix, many of the existing apps won't work anymore. That is, you may not enter your house for another reason. So it's not very nice. So the problem is that when you put a bad design in place, it stays there. So that's the reality. This is the reference. You will get all these slides in source form. This is the reference. It's really interesting. It's from 2016, but you can find as many as you want. So I think that my first mission is to explain people who are not in computing what is a bug, and to people here who are in computing, how to explain other people what is a bug. Because there is no reason that somebody not in computing knows what is a bug. So who is not in computing here? Not many. Huh? So I will try to explain you, then if you're in computing, I will try to explain to external people what is a bug. It took me a long time to make that because, you know, there are no bugs like that in mechanics. It's completely different. And so let's go. Some example first. This is the Zune, the Microsoft competitor to the what is it called? iPod, to the iPod. And that was delivered to kids in 2007, and this is what happened on the 31st of January, which is at midnight, which is the same as this is just a piece of code asking whether we are in a leap year, an bisextile, and the answer is yes, and error here, and the thing started looping. So all of them at the same second empty the battery. So it's fine because you have, of course, there was a wrong. It was one character difference, huh? That's all. And it's fine if you wait for 24 hours, the bug disappears for 4 years. But there are many others like that. For example, the Sony PS3, that's a famous one, PS3 FAT. On the 28th of February 2010, I think, there was a bug inside a corner of an ARM processor that cellular leap years and completely screwed out everything and put back the clock to the 1st January 2000. And so that destroyed the results of the games and destroyed the possibility of accessing the network. Made people happy. The iPhone alarm clock bug is very nice too. In 2009, on the iPhone 4, they changed the clock automatically during the winter time, going from summertime to winter time, and they also changed the alarm clock. So you can find on the web zillions of people saying, I missed my plane and everything. These bugs are very often. This is typically in parts of the code you delegate to beginners. And of course, in 1991, during the first Gulf War, the Patriot missile bug, which is that the Patriot missile was counting, the computer was counting the time in decimal in 1/10 of a second. I don't know why. It was not built in 1530, but still. And after 110 hours, the error was enough so that the Patriot got completely out of way, and 28 people died. And there was an official fix in documentation. You should reboot the system every few hours because it's so badly designed that it's incapable of holding the time, contrarily to your Swiss watch that you pay 20 euros and that know how to do that very well. So this is crazy. Hardware bugs, this one was the first, this one was very important historically because it really introduced formal verification in hardware. In 1994, on the Pentium Pro, a math professor found that there was a bugged division. The division, the return by the Pentium was not good. So Intel said, well, who cares? And then people started caring. In particular, a finance company said, oh, with this bug, we would have lost $40 million, but we didn't have this Pentium. Okay, so that costed $475 million to Intel, and they, with much less money, they opened a very big lab on verification. Deadlock in AMD, that costs a lot of money to AMD. This one is interesting. It's not even a functional bug, by the way. In 2011, Intel Stanley Bridge, a new generation of Pentium, one misdimensioned transistor among 2.5 billion. $1 billion. So they care now about bugs. It's a little more expensive to make bugs than anything else. And that's a problem for embedded systems. It's very hard to verify system on chips. And, well, it's getting, because the people are really serious there. They are not beginners, and they try their best, and they still work reasonably well. But you will never hear about bugs anyway. Of course, you know this one. So this one was, if I can say, a bonus for us. So this is the first launch of Ariane. It's famous here, of course. And it was a software bug while the system was working absolutely perfectly. Everything was normal. And the software, the bug was in totally useless software, which has been never used for 8 years. It's a long story, and everything was working perfect and so on. And the tests had been done on Ariane 4 trajectory, which was very stupid. So it's interesting because it's related to certification. Because Ariane had asked for an external verification of a very piece of code. I saw the thing. And the verification verified every line of the code except the one that failed. And it's interesting because in the final report by Gilles Kahn, who was my friend, it is written something that nobody understands unless knowing the thing, which is when you ask for a verification, read it. It's written like that because the people are very happy, but nobody reread the verification. Well, in math, when somebody makes a proof, you check it. And it was quite visible that this time was specific. Anyway, so in space, in honor of Toulouse, Pathfinder was almost lost because of a priority inversion in the operating systems. And it's very interesting because the NASA said this is the first time we hear of this bug. And Leslie Lamport answered, read my 1967 paper. The solution is in it. Spirit had a hard life too because when it reached Mars, it was logging events in flash memory. And when it landed on Mars, it rebooted. And then it could not reboot because the flash memory was too full. And they saved it by an incredible surgical operation. Very happy to do that. The Spirit had a nice life after that. This one is very nice, of course, Mars Orbiter, because it died because the last trajectory correction was sent in feet and inches instead of meter, so that's very efficient. So, but not only programs have bugs. The worst thing is that tools, fundamental tools, have bugs too. They are not officially called bugs, but they are bugs. Design bugs. So this is Simulink. So Simulink is probably the most useful tool in industry for whatever concerns embedded software. It's a simulation tool. The language has no semantics whatsoever. It's very hard to do what it does. And it is very interesting because here is a simple problem. So you have this ball D1 at D1, and you will launch it. And it will hit the ball in D2, and it will do that. If you want, it will simply do that. Basic simulation, classical mechanics. So here are the equations. So you have a trivial linear equation. They give the derivatives and shock actions, which say that when a ball hits another ball, they exchange their speed. And when a ball hits the wall, they reverse the speed. And that's trivial and so on. So fine, simulating that works correctly. However, something weird happens if you do this, the second is on the wall. Because if you look at what's going on, here this ball will move and it will hit this ball. So this ball will start towards the wall, but it cannot move. So in zero delay, it will immediately, in Newton mechanics, it will bounce on the wall. But in zero delay, it will hit the other ball. So in zero delay, the other ball will get out. So you have 5 events that occur exactly at the same time. And Simulink doesn't know this notion. Simulink is based on integration and a positive epsilon. So when trying to compute that, it will do epsilon, 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 epsilon. It doesn't, is lost in the epsilon. The epsilon is just too big for the phenomenon. So it's not clear. Simulink recognizes the fact by saying, Oula, I really don't know what will happen. It depends on some tuning of the execution mode that nobody can understand anyway because it's not documented. But this is what may happen, for example, which is not very nice. And so this is really a design problem. And this design problem is serious. It's not a joke. And is it solvable? The answer is yes, but you need to do more than just solving the problem. You need to understand it. That is a very common way of solving problems is to put one solution in place and say, well, this is the decision we take. It may be completely unreasonable, but that's always sometimes how industry works. And well, can you do better? Good. So that's what happened. So you can do much better. And you can do the right programming languages or simulation languages with the right type system. We have all the theory to do that, especially in France. And you can guarantee, for example, in Zelus, a language done by Marc Pouzet, Albert Vannis, and so on, you can guarantee that you will have the right result. So it's highly different. If you cannot be confident in your simulation, then you are not in good shape. And I mean, this example is trivial. It has nothing hard in it. So how to explain what is a bug? Here is the way I do. The problem of computing is this. Here you have Kepler, a guy I would hire without any problem. Very intuitive, very slow human being, and not very rigorous. Does it best as the mathematicians. But you know, proofs say always, the reader will complete the proof. We all see that, and so on. And here you have Mr. Haswell. So that's a Pentium, about 4 billion transistors, hyper fast, hyper exact, hyper stupid. So this is the two most opposite things you can imagine. What is a computer is exactly the opposite of human being. When I was teaching 6 to 9 years old kid, I tried to tell them, let's be as stupid as a computer. And the kid told me, it's just too difficult. So we have to go from there to there, and this is called programming. And if you do it randomly, as many people still do, you get what you get on telephone apps. For example, I like the telephone app by Le Monde, which is just full of bugs. It's getting better, but it keeps telling me, Le Monde s'est arrêté. I find that marvelous. Okay, so here is an illustration that I even showed and was even understood by CEOs, which is the hardest population ever. So this is Manhattan. I live there. My friend lived there. And I tell my friend to visit me. And of course, in Manhattan, you cannot go straight because of roadworks, one-way street, and so on. And so I dictate machine code, which is this. And my friend is not very clever. He doesn't want to be clever as a computer. And T is tout droit, straight. D is droite, right. And G is left, okay, gauche. And so this is the definition of the trajectory. It's a machine language. You have to be as stupid as a computer, and you do this. That's fine. But a real program is this in 1 million character, okay? So this is, okay, so on 1 million character, it's very hard not to make a mistake somewhere, either because you are too tired, you wrote the wrong letter, or because the guy copied the wrong letter, and so on. So assume you make one little error. This T changed into this D. Very simple, almost no difference. So if you look at the trajectory, it goes nowhere. If you make another bug somewhere else, you get to another nowhere. And then you discover that the number of nowhere is far superior to the number of where you want to go. Which is that the right definition of a computer is very simple. A computer is the most extraordinary error amplifier ever built. That's the definition, the right definition of a computer. So if you understand that, you start understanding what is a bug. It's fun, but it is absolutely serious. Now you do distributed systems. There you have 3 new kinds of bugs. So this one is a classic. It's a deadlock. Deadlock, Liz and Laure have each one to have the 2 things to draw to make their drawings, and they have one and they don't want to release it, of course. So it's locked forever. So deadlock is not too bad because you see that your machine is locked, but it's not very nice either. Very hard to correct often, especially with kids, by the way. But maybe because you discuss with the kid a lot, they agreed to exchange and they agreed to share. But little Manon comes in and she's just too small to be able to catch the thing, and the system will work because Liz and Laure can work, but Manon can never work. So in your system, you have one part. The system is working, but one part is never working. Very hard to debug and very hard to correct. So this is called starvation, very difficult. If you have that in your system, be careful. If you don't have that, you will not know. Timing. So timing is the difference between the 20th century and the 21st century. Since there are still many people of the 20th century here, they will understand. So here is the problem. You have to meet at the ski lift at 1 o'clock precise, sharp. but 2 people. But I'm used to be ahead of time, and my friend is used to be late. So I will arrive ahead of time, 3 minutes ahead of time, but it's minus 20 degrees, so it's freezing. So I say, I won't wait for the other guy. I will just make one more. Everybody has done that in his life. So I do one more, because I will be fast enough. But of course, that's not true, because I'm not a very good skier. And the other guy comes at 1 or 3 and say, oh, I don't see him. Probably he is trying to make one more, but I'm a better skier. And that's it. And they don't talk to each other for 3 months or more. And everybody knows about that. So how do you get out of this? Solution 1, protocol. So you say, when I come in, I put a flag in the snow. If you can do that, which is not necessarily true, somebody can steal the flag and so on. I put a flag, I go, and if the second guy comes, then I see the flag, then wait for me. So that's fine, but it requires a shared resource. And shared resources are not easy in computing. This is the 20th century. So in the flag adds the missing causality link. It adds a visible causality in the system. That's the key in distributed system. It's not very hard, in fact. In the 21st century, it's quite different. So you go, same thing. So the guy comes in at 1 or 3, and with the telephone, it's all over. And it shows that, there was a discussion on that this morning, it shows that asynchrony and synchrony are completely different things. And that a fixed telephone and a mobile telephone are completely different things. And I can tell you the story of a 4-year-old kid, who asked to Eric Spitz, his grandfather, who was the head of LCR Thomson, Daddy, why did you put an anti-theft wire in seeing his phone with a wire going to the wall? Never seen that before. So I cannot do these things for people of the new generation because they don't understand with the first thing that what about the cell phone? Huh? So that's quite interesting because it shows that people discuss about synchrony, asynchrony, and so on. And they don't understand. It's totally not the same set of capacities. You can even warn in advance that you will be late. And that's also something that is a major advantage of synchronous communication. Anyway, so how do you feed the bugs? Your boss is from mechanics. That's totally ideal to feed the bugs. So, yeah, you think that a bug is a machine failure. So this happened to me all the time. The le logiciel est tombé en panne. The software made a mistake. The software had a failure. No, software don't have failures, and that's not true. So, computing bug probabilities. I was asked for that by the Nuclear Plant Safety Institution. What is the probability of having bugs in this program? This is a completely stupid question. So the answer is completely stupid, is 0 or 1. There is no probability in this domain. How come everything has probability? No, absolutely not. To have probabilities, you need to have distributions, you need to have things like that. No. So this is nonsense. Either there is a bug or there is no bug. What is the probability that the Fermat theorem is wrong? It's not a right question. Viewing software as lighter mechanics. This has been done long in lighter mechanics. Added redundancy by simply doubling the system, which is what happened to Ariane. So the first gyro laser say, sorry, overflow, I'm down. The second identical say, sorry, overflow, I'm down. So there was no more. Well, none of them was down, actually, but it's very interesting. And because you are in a deterministic system, and if you put two alike in software, it's not in mechanics, because it's not a failure. None of them failed. And actually, there was no responsibility, because in the space technology at the time, there was a basic law that a failure is critical if and only if it is undetected. But here the failure was detected by the software itself. So you say, oh, I've detected that I am wrong, so I shut down. I'm not responsible because I did my work. I said I'm down. So the two did and stunk. So this has changed afterwards. Testing the basic usage cases. Bugs are always in the non-basic case. And users are absolutely experts are going to the non-expected case. I have an infinite list of that. And untested non-functional bugs are the best way for hackers to enter the system. And the problem is that finding non-functional bugs is an infinite task. It's proving that the thing will work whatever the enemy is. And it is very hard. This is good because it's close to certification. Following to verify the verification. I told that about Ariane. This is very common. So most certification is about verifying the verification. And that's serious. This is what we try to do in scientific paper reviewing. Okay. So this is the thing that you should explain to everybody. Bugs are human failures, not machine failures. It's very hard to make people understand that, but we need to do that. The problem is very often very early. For example, in the SmartThing housing system, the problem was not in the code, it was in the spec. The spec was stupid, that's it. And it's very, very easy to find this. I even find in a nuclear software specification a fantastic sentence. If the programs receive multiple alarms in a very short time, it should react appropriately. I'm not joking, I kept that seriously. That's the best specification ever. I mean, it's very easy for industry to say, we obey the specification, okay? We did what was needed. Over-specification is also very common, and that's a big danger because it's hard to see that you over-specify. Anyway, you know that here. So it is not possible to realize a good application even if the specifications are only ugly. It's sufficient. And that's the major thing because we don't know really how, we discussed that this morning, we don't know how to do specifications. To do the contrary, to try to get rid of them, you need to have good design tools, specs, model, languages, make everything visible. For example, in C, you know C as a language. You know that there are 192 cases in the norm where what the program will do is completely unspecified. That's life. It was done long ago. Make everything visible, so that all the programming environments are done for that, but it's not easy. Certification is really much about that. Review, which is also difficult because it's completely boring to review code, but it's done in a public domain code very much. Testing, but testing, I will show you random testing the power. And now we can do better. We can do formal verification. I will talk about that. So we can, verification has a gradation. So you can say completely understanding what we want to do. That's completely impossible, of course. We don't know what we want to do. It's on our mind. Specifying that the program should do. This is even not mastered yet. Understanding what the program does. This is not mastered yet. For example, in C. Demonstrating perfect patch of all this, so we try to do our best, it's just too difficult. So we can do partial verification, that's very nice. There will be no overflow, this has been done on the A380. The elevator will never travel with the door open, that's trivial. This is the kind of proof we do automatically in, I don't know, a tenth of a second for a complex elevator. If I call the elevator, it will eventually pick me up, so that's more difficult. Like that. Science doesn't obey us really. And it's very hard to verify piecewise system, and that's still a big problem. Progress is slow. Of course, you have several constraints. For example, if you're in avionics, you have a safety critical. If you are, and a car is not considered safety critical. There are many more people dying from cars than from airplanes, but anyway. Very high quality for mission critical. Time to market is very important too. For example, in the hardware industry, Nintendo almost died long ago because they could deliver their product in February instead of November. Christmas is in between. And life critical, I don't think there is anything serious in medical appliances about certification, which is serious. I mean, you get operated by a surgeon robot, and I think it's checked by doctors. An example of good testing, CSmith. So CSmith is a project done in 2011. Now it has been, many projects have improved in that, checking C compilers. Why? Because C is the assembly language of everybody. You generate C code and so on. And compilers bugs can be very bad. even for security. There have been recently reported a compiler bug, I think, on LLVM, which is one of the most important C compilers, such that if you compile the sudo command in Unix, which allow you to get system privilege, a compiler bug made that the sudo command did not ask any password, and you can get sudo just by getting sudo, by just modifying sudo, recompiling to take advantage of this bug. So C is a very complex language, very complex, contrarily to what is said everywhere. It's certainly the most complex language ever made. I mentioned 191 undefined behavior, 52 unspecified, left to implementation choices, so it's not very nice. And it has to be optimized. So the result is that CSmith is a random generation for C programs that are correct and try to target delicate aspects of the language, the one in particular for optimization. And they generated 1 million programs. And they feed 20 compilers, something like that. No, 12 compilers, sorry, 20 is now. At the time, 12 compilers, GCC, LLVM, CLang, commercial compilers, and CompCert. And the answer was hundreds of bugs found, especially in intermediate phases. And different compilers had different bugs. That was very good for them because 11 compilers would agree and one of them would be different, so they didn't have to search for the bug. They ship it to the compiler maker. And one survivor, CompCert. Actually, 2 bugs were found, but in non-specified parts of C, so it's not absolutely clear. And why? We'll see that later. Interesting, the numbers are interesting. For example, in LLVM, 4.5% of the program crashed the compiler in the beginning, and now it's almost nothing. GCC, it's very interesting to see. You see GCC 3, so they are getting better. GCC 4, whoop, that was 9% here, 9%. Here is 4. So you multiply by 100 the number of compiler crash when you go from 3.4 to 4.0. That's life, huh? Difficult to do. And these things are monsters, huh? And GCC must be close to 20 million lines of code now, or something like that. Several million. Wrong generated code. This is quite far worse, okay? But for example, here you find 7% for an LLVM 2.4. It was visibly not the right version to get. How do you know that? How do you know that? Huh? GCC was better. And well, now they fix the bug. In the beginning, they wouldn't even fix the bug given by CSmith, but now they do. CompCert 0, because it's formally proven. So let's see why we need to do formal proofs. Because Dijkstra said, and Turing said that before, actually, program testing can be a very effective way to show the presence of bugs, but it's hopelessly inadequate for showing their absence. This is obvious, but what can you do? Yes. So it starts with doing formal mathematics. So there is a very nice statement by Lamport. Gwindon, long ago, said, writing is a natural way of letting you know how sloppy your thinking is. I think it's a very nice sentence. Lamport says, mathematics is a natural way of letting you know how sloppy your writing is. And mathematics has one advantage. There is one unique language in the world. It's the only case. Huh? And formal mathematics is the same, how sloppy your mathematics is. And when we do formal mathematics, we see that mathematics is quite sloppy, but mathematics is creative. Huh? So a formal method is something quite complicated. You have this is the most important thing. You have a mathematical and intuitive kernel. You have several, lambda calculus, logic, synchronous programming. You have many. And you have the sky here, algorithmic thinking, design, human beings, reasoning of correctness. So this is by construction plain wrong most of the time. This is well defined, and this is what's happening. So you need implementation, optimization, and verification. So what you need is to make this extremely solid, really. The rest is already quite solid, actually. And Alan Turing in 1949 recognized that, he had this program, and he wrote this wonderful text in order that the man who checks may have too difficult a task. The programmer should make a number of definite assertions which can be checked individually and from which the correctness of the whole program easily follows. That means it says proving program is a problem of logic. And this is what we do now. So this is how he proved his program. You see, Turing had no assembly, not even assembly. These are storage location. And he said we have to inject assertions. So these are logical assertions about what the program does, and do induction and do a proof of termination and all that stuff. So 1949, everything was in place. So there are lots of formal methods, and that makes the landscape not trivial. Type checking is fundamental. It has disappeared, however. Type checking was introduced, the right type checking was introduced by Milner in the 70s. And Camel, Haskell, F star, Scala, these are languages with strong type checking, and lots of bugs are shown at compile time. Now, people want the converge. They say Python. Python is very nice because you make never any bug in Python. True. All programs do something. It's not bad, actually. JavaScript, the same. JavaScript, the rule is the show must go on the web. And the show will go on, whatever happens, the show will go on. But you don't sit on that. Huh? You don't. A good question to the room. You program the airplane. Will you fly it? Who will fly it? Huh? We program the airplane, and we have to fly it. You fly it. Good. So abstract interpretation developed by Kuzo and many places all over the world now is very fundamental. So you have Polyspace now by the MathWorks, and Absinthe in Germany. They can do a lot of things on that, and it has been used a lot. It's hard, but the best was on the A380 to show the absence of error à la Ariane. And automatic is very nice because automatic doesn't require a priori any knowledge from the user, except that it's not quite true. The user has to understand that it could write his program in a way that no automatic thing can do it, for example, in Python, or he can write it, for example, in F star, where automatic will do it. Python is hopeless. I mean, you cannot prove anything in Python. And so there are lots of systems. And this is interesting because they are changing the world now. SAT, for example, is you take a Boolean formula, you want to know whether it can be made true. A or B can be true if A is B, is true, or A is B. But if you take a formula with, say, 100 variables, it was thought that no algorithm would be able to do that. 500 variables, no. And now we solve formula with 2 million variables. Fabulous algorithms. You can see them in my course. Nobody knows why they work. No problem. So that's very important. Temporal is more difficult, but there are very nice systems like time petriness or UPAL or that are really heavily used in many industries. For example, they found a bug in Bang & Olufsen stereo system that Bang & Olufsen has spent 10 years changing. And nobody has been able to, the system would lock, and you pay that la peau des fesses, and it just locks, and they took 10 years not finding the bug, and it was found by UPAL, actually, and many things. And also for security, there are provers for security. So this is nice, it's not magic. And the problem is that you cannot verify a program that has been written with no intention to verify it. That's not possible. I mean, it very often happens in industries that people come to you and say, we are in big trouble, please verify this program. No, that doesn't work. You need to couple verification and design. So there are two things, for example, proof assistance. So these are mathematical proof checkers. So you do a proof in mathematics, and it will be verified with quasi-absolute certainty. And this is used in industry. For example, after the bug, the Pentium arithmetic was proved using HOL, and the AMD, they do the proof of all the mathematics in and that's hard. I mean, a floating point division is not for beginners. Huh? So this is entirely proved. This is not tested. Huh? There is no test on that. It's proved. Industrial subway, I think even the Toulouse subway has been proved. And the RER-A was the first one. And RATP said the system should have been put in place automatic. And RATP said, no, we cannot be confident. And they were quite right, actually. And so Abrial was called, and he developed B, and then they made a proof and no test on the Meteor, for example, proof and no test. Operating systems, Cell4 at NICTA, which is the operating system kernel, which has been proved a lot. Minix, that's interesting because it's a completely industrial operating system, which has been proved in industry, and they make money out of that, which is quite new. And ComStrat that but it requires quite a lot of expertise. It's not to put in. We are doing in my lab. We are doing a proven STRL compiler, which is harder than C in some sense because it's parallel. Well, the landscape is pretty complicated, but anyway, some stories here. This is a rewriting that was used for hardware proofs a lot. PVS at SRI is used by NASA quite a lot. B was used for trains and subway. Polyspace is used in automotive. Astre, I've seen by Airbus. This was used for Pentium. This was used for Cell4. And this is getting much stronger now. So they did proof for security of the Visa card. And the US are building a $20 million project on using COC for proving systems. And so they don't use, in France we put 20 kilo euros, in the US they put 20 million, that's the difference. And they have big teams doing COC, and they probably do an independent COC. Anyway, that's quite interesting, and it's not yet industrial, it's not yet completely finished, but it paves the way to do system that works. So, for example, what you can do, what you cannot do is not intuitive. For example, here, you do an elevator. An elevator can be a complicated system if you code everything with all sensor, all failure modes, and so on. But for example, showing that the elevator never travels with the door open, which rises at the temporal formula, trivial temporal formula in that, it takes no time. If you write the elevator in STRL, you hit return, and either you get the counter example or it's proof. So that's easy. It's very useful because, for example, you ask the system to show. Can I visit all floors and come back here? And you say it is impossible to do that, and the system says, how come you just do this, and that is very useful for test generation. So one of the good properties of a prover is that they can generate tests. That is, you pose negative question, you get negative answer, which are tests, in fact. So this is done, verification is used at a very large scale in hardware. All transformation of circuits, hardware, designing a circuit is a huge number of steps of transforming Boolean logic, and it's all verified using SAT almost. And it's used in protocols, it's used in drivers now, it's used in distributed algorithms, and so on. This is harder. The elevator will eventually reach a floor when it has been called and open the door, I should say. So we will take the passenger. This is harder. It's not intuitive, but it is harder. While they somehow eventually is at arbitrary distance. This is harder to do, but we know how to do that too. It is not something you can test if the number of floors is a parameter. You don't say how many floors, so you cannot test that, but you can prove it. So sometimes proving can do things, testing cannot. So for Cell4, for example, here is the way they did. They wrote the operating system in Haskell. They are British people. British people have to code in Haskell, which is very powerful and quite British. And it was translated into a prover called Isabelle into two things, an abstract specification and an executable specification. And then there was a proof that these two match. And then they transformed automatically the Isabelle code into high-performance C code, and they could prove again the refinement. So it was a big work, because it was a pioneering work, but it worked very well. And the result is very good. It's about 10% slower than the original L4, which is one of the best, one of the speediest operating system you can put on the thing like a telephone. And for ComCert, it's 11 intermediate languages, 10 proven transformation, not necessarily in Coq. That is, there are many things that you prove in the mathematical framework. You prove that these arrows completely preserve the semantic, but sometimes no, because here register allocation, what you have to do is a graph coloring, if you know compiling. You have a large graph, and you need to know how many colors are needed to color it in such a way that for any edge, for any link, the edges have different colors. And so here you can run any of the shelf algorithm, and instead of proving the algorithm, you prove that the result is okay. So you cannot prove optimality, but you prove that it is okay. So this is very nice. So it's a delicate thing, okay, but now it's done, and that's it. And what is more interesting is that out of the proof, you can automatically generate the code. It's called proof extraction. It's based on a fundamental thing in computing, which is the Curry-Howard principle, that there is no difference between computing and proving, in fact. And this is very powerful, and Coq is the first system to have been able to do that, to generate. I want to do that. I want to generate automatically a proven STRL compiler from my semantics book. And actually, I never published my book about STRL because I never did the proof by hand. And we are in the process of publishing our books with proofs, which are links to code, so that the referee just have to run the code to check that the proof is okay. That's it. And well, the thing which is much more difficult is to understand the difference between modeling and programming. This is really the open, difficult problem. We need to model, we need to program, and it's better if there is a consistency between the two. And I think that here you are talking a lot about that. And this is a sort of endless story and the most difficult one. So we can do some proofs on models. We can do some proofs on program. It's not clear. For example, in security, it's like that. Okay, there are many important questions, like temporal synchronization, which is complicated, no, it's not complicated, it's delicate. And low power security, that's a big problem. Is that security will have to be low power in the Internet of Things. And for the time being, there is a contradiction between being low power and being safe. So that will be difficult. For example, if you the only way to get real security in cryptography is to make a machine that dissipate a maximum power and a constant power. So the power in the best case should be the same as the power in the worst case. Otherwise, measuring power tells you about the secret code. And so this is bad. Anyway, so conclusion. We are dealing with one of the great futures of computing. But I think that safety and security concerns, which are not recognized now, will slow it down seriously, and should. I mean, the computerization of cars should be slowed down and rethought, because it will be, by the way, by Tesla or by Google, because they know about formal verification. But Renault and PSA don't know anything about that, and that will be a problem. Direct hand coding with people with a shallow technical background, which is a rule, is just the best way to get into trouble. But well-trained people are not numerous, so that's difficult. And you can use good techniques to do that. That's it.